talks or openings and things like that. And today we're really, really happy and lucky to have Mary Witkowski and Charles Brilovitch, two of our most noted historians that we have in the city, to talk about the East Side and
that we know of.
Talk about the building.
There may be somebody.
So welcome,
way better
and
than us.
hope you enjoy the presentation.
Well, Charles and I would like to, we're so happy such a crowd has come today, and the idea of doing something about the east side of Bridgeport is really the idea of Eileen. When she said, do the east side of Bridgeport, I said, well, I have PowerPoint presentations on the women of Bridgeport, I have the history of Bridgeport in general, I have WPA in Bridgeport, so just remember that's the future. If any one of these, I got like 10 or 20 of them all set up. But I didn't have one on the east side of Bridgeport set up already, so I kind of called through some of the things I decided went with the east side, and it's not the East End. You know that, right? There is a definite difference in Bridgeport between the east side and the East End. And right, Charles, it's like you don't, if it's in the East End, it's in the East End. If it's in the east side, it's in the
Actually,
east side.
that's a legal definition as of 1889.
Really?
There was a chunk of the town of Stratford that was called West Stratford that was annexed by Bridgeport in 1889, which is between Yellow Mill Pond and Bruce Brook. And when it was annexed, when the people voted for it, the legal terminology that was voted by the state legislature said it shall be known as the East End.
Do you have a glass of water for me, Eileen? No, I'm fine. The one. I think we have a glacier outside right now. As far as I'm concerned, this has been amazing, the snow. The reason why I thought this was great, though, I actually, when I started going through some of the slides and information I had, I decided that focusing on the east side was wonderful because the east side has not been really focused on. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, knowing that all these things that they were going to build on the east side and never got started, that taking a good look at the east side and seeing what does exist now, what did exist in the past.
Right. Nobody ever did a history of it, per se.
Yeah, we're thinking about doing it now that we've kind of pulled some stuff together. But the, is that vodka?
Full of vodka.
Yeah, there are a few good resources. There's a guy by the name of General William H. Noble who had Noble Avenue named after him and was kind of the progenitor of all the development on the east side.
So,
And,
that's what I was going to.
well, in Orchid's history in 1886, he wrote about 3 pages called East Bridgeport by Personal Observation. And that's a really good source of history of the very early days from somebody who kind of was the guy who made it all happen.
The all the photographs and things that you're going to experience today actually are all from the History Center at the Bridgeport Public Library, which can use all of the energy from all of you because I want to keep that center going as long as I can. And we, have been sort of under siege the last few years, but I'm thinking that this is a new year, a new era, and just because this is actually, it's the 75th anniversary of that collection in the library because it started for the 100th anniversary of the city. This year is the 175th anniversary of the city of Bridgeport, which we should all be celebrating in some way. And so far, I haven't seen any real plans. They keep asking me what we can do, and this is actually the first program that I think we're doing to celebrate the anniversary of the city. So let's look at the first slide. Let's see what we have here. The idea of doing this was interesting because this is actually Bridgeport in 1836 It's a drawing by John Warner Barber in a collection of essays that he did. And tell us a little bit about this, Charles.
Well, this is taken from kind of where Steel Point is, looking over to where the ferry boat docks. And the river was a lot wider at that point. You can see a guy wading and pushing a rowboat, and another guy tonging for oysters with kind of a very short pair of tongs. So this whole shallow part of the harbor was filled in, and they built a big power plant there. It's interesting, a guy named Timothy Dwight, who was president of Yale, wrote a book called Travels in New England in 1815. And he said there's not in New England any place a location as beautiful as the borough of Bridgeport, particularly on the east side of the Pequannock River. And just this beautiful scenery of these bluffs covered with evergreen trees. He said it was without parallel any place in all of New England. And you read Noble's description from later years when he's talking about the 1830s. He's talking about these cliffs and the great forest growth of trees that was basically cut down to create the development of East Bridgeport. And you can kind of still see a little bit of this on Upper Knowlton Street, just below the Berkshire Avenue Bridge, where there's still that wooded bluff, although it's kind of covered with billboards and rubbish.
Wood? I never saw the bluff there. Now, Charles, who are the two people standing there?
J.W.
I'm going to
Barber,
quiz him on some things I don't
J.W.
think he
Barber,
knows.
and Timothy Dwight, of course.
Yeah, right. Could be, it could be.
Timothy Dwight is saying, yes, this place has changed a lot since I was here. My dinkies.
All righty, next one. And this is Colonel William Noble, but obviously taken after the Civil War.
He was a general after the Civil War. This is
Right,
during.
yeah, this was during the Civil War. This is a picture when he was in the 17th Connecticut, which is from the Bridgeport area. And we actually have the collection on the Connecticut 17th at the library. Huge collection. This is one of the photographs from there. But the reason why we're talking about him today is he had a definite, it was a statement about the east side of Bridgeport. He, one of the first people to own land, and actually his whole idea of selling land and selling lots was due to this man here. We wouldn't be here today, right?
Him and his father before him, except the father kind of didn't pan out too well.
What happened?
Financially, well, he built a bridge and he's going to sell all these building lots, and then there's the financial panic of 1837, and
Right.
the creditors got everything.
That was that. So the next person,
He made it.
the
Yeah.
next slide. Who else? But, you know, for Bridgeport, this is the greatest guy that ever lived in the city, and has managed to, he's, you know, the most interesting thing about these two people is they put together something that, you know, we've had Steel Point going for how long? How many years has that been sitting there vacant? How many years? It's been since I moved here. Oh, really? 10 years? I thought it was
Well, there's
longer.
been plans to knock it down going back to the late 70s, early 80s. It was Steel Point, and then it was something else.
So I know it was a different time, and that things
Harbor Point.
were, you know, land hadn't really been touched yet. But Noble and Barnum, they really put together a dynamite plan, and they did it within, you know, it took them a little bit of time because of the financial problems, not unlike the problems of today. But somehow they pulled it out, and we still benefit from some of the places now. Although when you look at the East Bridgeport area after going through all these things the last few days, it almost feels like it was like a movie where things were just like paradise for a while. And I mean, things were just really living and vivacious here, and vitality, and all the inventors that you ever thought of lived in this area. That is like the thing that's so amazing to me, is that so many people are actually living in this area, right on Knowlton Street. You can't even get off this street. You're like right around this area, and you've got people that were real excited about Bridgeport, and And it was called Pembroke, right, at first?
Yeah.
Pembroke City? How do you get that name?
Pembroke is a name that it was called in old deeds in the town of Stratford going back to the 1600s. Basically, when the first settlers came to Stratford, they all settled in what's now Stratford Center, between Broadway and South Avenue, basically. And it was stockaded, and everybody had like 1 acre. They could have their own cow and a couple of apple trees and a couple of chickens, but all the farmland was outside of that. And there was this kind of land distribution system that was very equitable by English tradition, but everybody got like a 3-acre piece here and a 2¼ acre piece 4 miles away over there, and a 9-acre piece of woods 10 miles up into the woods, and everybody had all these little slivers of property. And they laid all these chunks of the town of Stratford out into these divisions, and the east side was called New Pasture. And they laid out Boston Avenue where it is for the reason that horses could wade across the Pequannock River and Old Mill Creek, right where the bridges are over those rivers, and a little bit further downstream it was too deep. So that's why Boston Avenue is as far inland as it is. Anyway, they laid out this one road through the east side, and they called it Pembroke Street. In the oldest deeds, it's called Panbrook, which is probably named for the Pan family of Native Americans. Pan means people of the waterfall in the Caripi language. And the Pan family continued to make baskets and peddle them through the mid-19th century, and they camped on the site of Lakeview Cemetery. I guess
Wow.
they anglicized things, so Panbrook became Pembroke, which is a county in Wales, and it would have been the last piece of England that settlers traveling by boat to the New World would have seen.
So this is Noble's house. I mean, this house was owned by somebody else before he owned it.
Yeah, it was built by a guy named Thomas Salmon, who built the Captain John Brooks house, which is up at 90 Acres Park, and there's a house at 45 Huntington Road, a little 1.5-story cottage that was built in
This was like where
1789.
New Pasture Point is.
This is by the corner of Cassuth Street and Stratford Avenue, kind of underneath the throughway ramp.
So the thing that's interesting is he is the one, like Noble, Barnum, and Wheeler all had, tremendous mansions. But the one that actually chose to live on the east side is Noble, right?
Yeah,
Already.
well, he had an interest in agriculture. He used to write for all these farm journals about correct way of grafting pears and quinces, and I guess he needed like 5 acres to indulge his hobbies, which wasn't available in the more urbanized western bank of the river.
So here's Barnum's house, which you have probably heard of, Iranistan, or how do people in Bridgeport say it? And, I'm from Michigan, what do I know? But that's what,
Well, I always thought the house was Iranistan, but the street was Arniston Avenue.
right.
So they would differentiate between the two.
And he actually loved Iranistan so much that he had it on his letterhead. And this is, it burned down in 1857. This is when he was doing the project on the east side. I mean,
This is when he was in
he was
his
in its
financial
highlight.
problems.
Yeah, but it's when things kind of, when he started the project on the east side, it started out good, and then bad things started happening. One of them was a Jerome clock company that was supposed to be one of the first things to move into the area, and he actually loaned Mr. Chauncey Jerome money so that it could
$400,000.
support it, a lot of money. And then the panic happened in 57, and so things kind of went bad, but guess what? You wonder though, why did his house burn down in 1857?
Just about the time all the financial problems came.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, so that's actually that's the Iranistan, that's the house that you've heard of that Mark Twain said, he came to Bridgeport and saw this house and they said, what was his famous line? It was in the Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court.
Yeah, he sees all these towers
Right,
of the English
right.
city, and he says, "What's this, Bridgeport?" In reference to this. And they say, "No, it's Camelot." Back up for a second. Jenny Lind was this great singer in Europe, and P.T. Barnum wanted to bring her to America, guaranteed her a ton of money, like $1,000 for every concert, which was unheard of. And he sent her a letter with that stationery, and she said later she never would have come to America if she hadn't have seen that. And a guy who had a house like that couldn't be some fly-by-night operator. So she came, he made a ton of money, and just about when he's counting up his profits, there's an ad in the New York World for undivided half of land in Bridgeport, Connecticut, that this guy, William Noble, wants a investment partner on. And he sends for Noble. Noble comes down to his office in New York, and in 15 minutes they conclude the whole deal. Noble goes home with $20,000 in his pocket, and he's got P.T. Barnum for a partner.
There you go. Yep. So here it is. This is what they laid out on the east side, and it was actually laid out by I think it was an engineer, Lane, his name.
Yeah.
He.
James W. Lane, he later became a general in the Civil War.
This is what exists today. It's exactly the same way in terms of there's Knowlton Street. You see it there on the left.
Yeah, we're right up
Right.
where it says Walnut Street at the top. You
Yeah.
see that?
Yeah.
But it all got filled in on the water side of Knowlton Street.
And the idea was after, sort of an English village of town green, and all this, the houses were built around it. The good thing is if you've got a property, just like today, if you have property and you're naming it after somebody, you name it after yourself or your family. And so William Noble and Barnum named after all the streets and all the property.
Harriet was,
What's that?
Harriet was Noble's wife.
Right, Harriet, yeah, and there's Noble Avenue, and the Barnum, of course, Barnum. And the Pauline Street was his daughter. What else is there? Seeley, Harriet Seeley.
Sterling was Noble's brother-in-law.
Okay.
Forget who
So
Clarence.
now when you drive around the east side of Bridgeport, just pay attention.
Who's Knowlton?
Yeah.
Knowlton was the guy
Right,
who
that's a
built
really good question.
the bridge. He was a bridge and dock builder, and he made a deal with Barnum and Noble. There's all this kind of mud flats along Knowlton Street, and it's like on the water side of William Street. It was all pretty worthless, and he came up with the idea of dredge the river, create new land, and he got the deal. Barnum and Noble got an extra row of lots, and he got lots like where we are right now, and everybody made money and came out happy. It's just those big 20-foot bluffs with the hemlock trees on top kind of got lost in the process, but this was becoming a city.
What's the landscape for the Washington Park?
That's a good question. Washington Park, this is 1858 map?
1857.
57, okay. Washington Park looks nice there, but it didn't really exist in that form. Barnum wasn't the guy who said make no little plans because they have no power to inspire people, but he could have been. Nobody lived on the east side. It was all empty land. Bridgeport was a little town of 7,500 people. And Barnum just started thinking, how do we get this thing going? How do we get people over here? So he came up with his idea that he called his profitable philanthropy. They gave away every other building lot if people would promise to build a substantial home within 6 months. So that when that happened, the lots that were left in between were worth like 4 times as much because they were now in a built-up, prosperous neighborhood. Gave free land to factories. This was a factory that manufactured all the wheels for trains in the whole country. This was a carriage factory where they used to ship carriages down to South America. Bridgeport Brass Company was started here. all kinds of industries had their genesis right in this period of the 1850s. And by the time it was all over, everybody had become millionaires, where there had been nothing before.
One of the things that started here in that area is the Monumental Bronze Company, which actually, if you go to the cemeteries still, and wherever you go, all over the United States, you see these incredibly, people call me all the time, like, where did this come from? It's this incredibly white stone on these gravestones. It's like so, it's made with zinc, and that's what they were using then.
Yeah, do my tours of Mountain Grove Cemetery, and people are always looking at all these stone monuments, and then I go up to one and go, conk, conk, conk,
Right.
and it makes a sound like a bell almost. And that's what it is, it's hollow, and that was their big idea.
And it keeps its color, it's like perfectly white.
Yeah, a good example of that is the Civil War monument in Stratford Center on Academy Hill.
What was this building that we're in now?
Mary's gonna get to that later.
What was what?
This is the Armstrong Manufacturing.
Yeah, I'll talk about that. So this is the 1875 map of Bridgeport. I was just brought this out to show you. You know, we were already getting quite large. You can see the Olmsted Park, Seaside Park, the layout down there, right? But then you get closer, the next one, to the river, and you can see the things along the river, and you see where East Bridgeport is now kind of, you know, it's coming together.
Yeah,
It's,
that first slide, when we saw the two
and you
guys.
see the bridge, which is like the big
Right
thing
here.
in Bridgeport, or the bridges. I mean, how many people have asked me about the bridges, and Congress Street Bridge, I mean, it's a sin that it's been not developed. That's one of the reasons why, you know, the east side has really suffered in the last few years, is because that bridge is not up.
If we can go back just a couple of years to 1864,
Uh-huh.
East Bridgeport and Bridgeport were legally not the same entity. There was the city of Bridgeport, which was basically the downtown area, the hollow, the south end. And then there was the town of Bridgeport. It was the whole north end, the whole east side, upper east side. And the town didn't have things like police and fire protection. They had roads that were just plain dirt. They didn't have gravel on them, and they turned into mud quagmires. And Barnum and Noble started this development, and within a couple of years, they had 75% of Bridgeport's industry. But they didn't have policemen, they didn't have a firehouse, and the bridge, the Congress Street Bridge, which Barnum and Noble built, was a toll bridge. So anytime somebody wanted to go downtown, they had to reach into their pocket and shell out a nickel, which was a lot of money in those days. So in 1864, East Bridgeport said, we're going to start our own city. We're going to call it the City of Pembroke. And people in Bridgeport became alarmed because a lot of their tax base with all these big industries and everything was on the east side. So Bridgeport said, okay, how can we make a deal here? What do you want? And they said, we want the bridge turned into a free bridge. We want city water. We want police. We want fire protection. And we want the roads fixed. So the city agreed to that. There was an election, and like 97% of people on the east side voted to become part of the city of Bridgeport. The city purchased what's the Congress Street Bridge today from Barnum and Noble, and they threw it open as a public free bridge with the promise that this would forever be kept open to the citizens of the east side.
1875, this map was picked because Barnum was mayor 1 year. 1875 was the year he was mayor. So it was only, back then, it was only a year that you were mayor. You had 1 year to do whatever. He did a lot during that year. Okay?
I think you got paid $1 for
There's the bridge. This is actually a postcard, a later postcard, of course, but there's the Congress Street Bridge actually working around, across the river, the Paquonic River.
Yeah, this is when it was practically new. And
This
people
is
were
probably
proud of it
1909.
and would send postcards to people around the country saying, look at what a progressive city we have with this nice bridge that everybody else is going to be so jealous of.
What year did it break, for lack of a better word?
I went across the bridge. I've been here since 1987.
Early 90s, I think.
Early 90s. Alrighty. This is one of my favorite buildings, and we have, does anybody know if this building is still standing? I haven't been checking my
Partially.
buildings lately. Is it,
Partially.
did it come down?
What's the
Where
damage
is
to the
that?
tomato?
Yeah.
It was, that's what he was saying, so
Crescent.
if we're gonna save any
Right, right,
buildings,
right.
that should be one of them. That should be one of them.
Yep, yep.
Yeah. I just put this in to show you that's the entrance to this area here. And that building should be restored. Hopefully it hasn't just disappeared in the middle of the night.
Norwalk would do with a building like that.
What was that building when it first got built?
Wheeler and House Cole.
And it's the end of the bridge, Congress Street Bridge, is that the one?
It would be a great studio space. There we go. It would be great for anything. It's a really cool building, but it's, because it was coal and I don't know what the interior is like.
I've been all through the interior and, I don't think the coal was ever kept in the building. I think this is more the flour, grain, and hay department. It's not it's like this on the inside. It's not like a giant coal bin.
Right. And here we are again with the bridges. Boy, I mean, you can really see this is in Barnum's biography, this photograph, his autobiography. He wrote an autobiography called Struggles and Triumphs. And he talks very proudly about East Bridgeport, like just amazingly about the things that happened and how, and just what things were happening in Bridgeport itself that he was just so proud of, and that he managed to sell these lots and had people coming and was getting all these industries, attracting them to the city, and it really was through him. I mean, even though you don't see them today in the city, it's like, it's not due to Barnum's fault, really. It's due to whatever the economy of the 20th century was like. So,
He did write, it's like the last paragraph of the East Bridgeport chapter, that now that he's an old man, nothing gives him more satisfaction in life than going for a carriage ride up and down the streets of East Bridgeport and seeing all these prosperous homes of workmen and knowing that before there was nothing, and he's very satisfied that he made it all happen. And it was really a national model of how to develop an industrial community from scratch and make it into something of beauty.
and here is Nathaniel Wheeler. He's a pretty handsome man, big hulk of a guy. We actually have a painting of him in the fine arts room at the library that was, it shows,
I'm looking at the chair. It's a-
yeah,
I like it.
he definitely had money, definitely dressed well, and he lived in the Wheeler Mansion, Harold Wheeler Mansion, which I'll show you a picture of. But he was one of the people that invested right away in the, well, not right away. Go to the next one. This is the other person that invested, Elias Howe. He opened up his sewing machine factory in 1863. And I know, you think about the fashions now, and like you remember like this, whatever, the long-haired version. Well, look at our gentleman taking photographs. I mean, he could be right in this picture. Put a big bow on front of you and you'll be good to go. So, yeah, you think they were wild, like hair and stuff, but some of these pictures are really something else. But Elias Howe, he opened the sewing machine factory in 1863, and actually his brother also was with him, Amanza, I think his name was. Yeah, they actually, every time I've always heard that Elias Howe was living here in Bridgeport with the factory, but actually his brother really ran the factory. And and his brother, I think, I'm just trying to, this is why when I was doing this whole thing, is I started like investigating all this stuff. And his brother, when both he and his brother wanted to be in the Civil War, and Elias Howe was one of the first people in Bridgeport to actually sign up for the Civil War. And there's a little roster of names, and he was right on the top.
And he's like 50-something years old with bad legs.
Yeah, he didn't really, he never really served in the Civil War, although I just read something about him being a postmaster or something. But his brother, I think, did serve, and now that you have Ancestry.com and we have all these sources at the library, I was trying to look up this guy and see what his military service was, and it did seem, I think it's him that was actually killed in like 1864, his brother. So just when all this stuff is happening, it's like all this bad luck. So that's Elias Howe.
Yeah, let me just point out, he was the guy who invented the sewing machine, which back in the 1840s and 50s, every garment, every pair of shoes had to be laboriously stitched together by hand. And people all over the world were trying to invent a machine that would do that. And everybody's thinking, you've got to take a needle and make it go up and down and up and down. Everybody's trying to think of all these gears and mechanisms that would make that happen. And Elias Howe is one of them, and everybody's going crazy. They can't figure it out. Elias Howe goes to sleep one night, and he has a dream. And it's like, instead of putting the thread through the end of the needle, put it through the bottom part, so it only has to go up and down, which is a very easy thing to have happen. So he invented the sewing machine, and it was all because of a dream he had one night.
There were a lot of people that actually were, it wasn't like a new thing to have, but he invented the first practical sewing machine. But his brother, I have to say, now that I've done a little research, he actually was more involved with things. He came from England, and he actually seemed to have perhaps come up with some of the ideas that this guy's more, famous for. So I have to figure that one out yet.
That stood on the side of the dog track, and that was still standing until about the mid-1970s.
The great idea was that he could actually just do shipping right down the river from this area, so it made it really convenient. So close to New York. I mean, it's great. They had a lot of the whole shipping area and everything. This is actually 1883. It's a little late, but this is actually, they must have had a shop on Main Street in Bridgeport, and they were selling their sewing machines. And just thought I'd throw an ad on in here. Wheeler Wilson's manufacturing company. Alan Wilson and Nathaniel Wheeler moved their company there. Yes, it was in the Jerome Clark factory. So
This would be the block, this would be Pembroke Street, and over here is the old Housatonic campus, and this is the vacant parking lots between the Remington Arms factory and the old Singer factory. And this was basically torn down in the early 1960s.
So there's absolutely nothing left of this? That's why when I was doing all this, I kept thinking, what's left? What's left?
If you dug down under the asphalt, there's probably some foundation bricks.
It was actually a beautiful building. I mean, they actually had like this dome on the top, and it was a pretty beautiful building. But just steps away from the place, the green that he built, and he had this band that he had, the Wheeler. You've of course probably heard of it, the Wheeler and Wilson band. Anyway, they would play in the what do you call it? The thing in the
Bandstand.
The bandstand. Yeah, bandstand. And there's lots of pictures of them. And whenever there was an event in Bridgeport, I mean any event, when Lincoln came, the Wheeler and Wilson band was there. When
Every Saturday afternoon during the summer, they would have a concert in the Washington Park bandstand, and it was for them that the bandstand was built.
Oh,
Oh, there they are. This is actually much later though, the labor union, but that bandstand was used in a lot of different events. And this is a whole other story, so we won't get into it. But labor in Bridgeport, you know, if you look at, if anybody's interested in looking at Bridgeport history.org, there's an entire 20th century labor history on there. And it gives you a lot of facts about what was going on.
But while we're on this, someone asked who laid out Washington Park. That whole 1864 vote, up until then, Washington Park was just kind of a vacant lot, and people would dump leaves and trash in it. And it was a park on paper, and we saw it on that map. It looked nice, but it didn't really exist. And it was in that year 1864 that the brand new Bridgeport Parks Commission took it over, had the fence built, and had the sidewalks laid out, and it really turned into something respectable looking. And it's after that date you start seeing photographs of it rather than like architects' renderings. I guess not everything worked like clockwork back in those days. Some things were like steel point.
And there's Elias Howe standing alone in Seaside Park. This actually, I think Charles and I have our differences in this statue, but I had read that this was actually originally supposed to go in Central Park in New York, and that the family was not happy with the statue. So then we ended up with
Says,
it.
you're not putting that in our
Right.
park.
Yeah, we ended up with it. Now, whether that's a true story or
A
not,
high-class park down here.
you often see a pigeon on the top of his head. And there's a little joke about it that I'm not going to say it right now, but does anybody know the joke?
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody knows it.
You want to go down Seaside Park and see how it's standing up.
Got it?
That's it.
That's it. You're going down to the park, you're going to go see Howe standing up.
I'm going to show you.
I'll show you how standing up, something like that. This is the Wheeler Wilson Sewing Machine Factory again, and you can see how elaborate it was. You know, this definitely was an artist's depiction of it, but I think it definitely looked like that. And you have a nice courtyard.
And every sewing machine in China, South America, Europe was made here in Bridgeport. And the name Bridgeport was known all over the globe.
They have one down over at the Barnum Museum if you want to see what they look like. But I grew up, my mom and I, we had a treadle machine. I didn't have an electric machine until I was like 20 or something. So, but we didn't have Wheeler and Wilson. We had a Singer and we had a White. But there were so many sewing machine companies at one point, when they were doing the treadles, and so.
Did they adapt Howe's invention, or did they buy it, the rights to it?
Well, some people said that House was having a big problem with make an invention. The patent, I guess somebody stole his ideas, and there was a big, huge struggle with all the, the
Right.
ideas being stolen.
Undermined his health, and he died relatively young.
Right, yeah.
Embittered.
Yeah, he was only in his 40s, I think. So, this is actually the Wheeler and Wilson band. I don't know, it's not really a band, but it's your typical parade. And this is, going up down Main Street. Everybody was out there.
Yeah, they merged with Singer in 1906. It's probably not too long after this picture was taken.
And there's the Wheeler Mansion, which is the same architect, Alexander Jackson Davis, who did Lyndhurst. Has anybody ever been to Lyndhurst in New York? Same architect, and also the same architect as the building, the next building. We definitely have to do something to it. They don't sell it, which is the Fairfield County Courthouse, which was now McLeavy Hall in downtown Bridgeport. That's the same architect as this. And
Where is Wheeler Mansion?
it was on Golden Hill Street.
You can see St. Augustine's in the background, and Route 25 cuts through
1957, I think.
58.
58, it came down. They were gonna, Archie and Wheeler, Archie and the twins. Archie Wheeler gave it to the city to make a civic center, or well, actually, I think it might have been an art center. And the city was looking out at it, and this would be a great place for a city hall. So, but then the highway went through, and that's where it is.
Well, actually, the highway didn't take the site of the mansion. This is kind of the backyard of City Hall.
Right, it came down for no reason.
And if you look, there's like 4 huge ancient copper beech trees that outline the house. And one of H.K. Harrell, who built its descendants, came from Mississippi to see where this had stood. And it was in August, and there was a drought. And they left the foundation in the ground. And where that foundation is, there's only like that much dirt on top of it. So there's a perfect outline in brown, dry grass during the drought of where the foundation was. So if you're getting another drought in August, you can go see for yourself.
A lot of people have memories of going to this. Did you ever go to the mansion? Does anybody here ever go there?
I remember seeing the foundation of it. My mom grew up on Knowlton Street in the Hollow, and when I was a little kid, 4 or 5 years old, it had only been down for, maybe 5 or 6 years at that point.
When I bought my house on Pierce Avenue, it's funny because I had a woman living next to me that turned out to be 105 years old or something, I don't remember now. But I was out weeding in the backyard, and she said, "Oh, don't take those." I don't know if she was talking like that. She said, "Don't take those. Don't take those violets out of your house or out of your yard, because they're all over the backyard." And I was like, "Why not?" She said, "Those are from the Wheeler Mansion." And I never knew if that was true, and they kind of died out. So, but there are people who had memories of going there.
Mary has pictures of the back garden, and it's like you're looking at a farm. There's all these rows of cabbages and rows of corn, and they grew all their own vegetables. It's amazing.
I just threw this in to show you how busy Bridgeport was. And this Stratford Avenue Bridge in 1908, but it just shows you that people were walking back and forth, going downtown, going to the east side. We have the trolley cars, we have the wagon here on the right. So much was going on, and there was, a lot of theaters, businesses, department stores. Each side, though, every side had their own kind
If
of.
you look at the scene today, you're looking east on the Stratford Avenue Bridge. You see the big thruway overpass going across, and just all this vacant, decaying, broken concrete.
We're not here to depress you. We might.
No, we're to inspire you
I'm
for
trying
what
to
a city's
inspire you. I
supposed to
think we
be.
need to do something with the east side. On the right side there, see the wharf kind of, what do you call it, dock kind of thing? That's actually the Myamock Yacht Club was on the right, I think, in this picture. Where is the Myamock Yacht Club now? Is there one?
East End.
On the east
On,
end? Originally it was there.
For the Central Avenue.
Yeah, later on, that's the point where the Jefferson Ferry first docked, and docked there until they built the through, I guess, in the middle to late 50s.
Yeah, they were talking about putting the ferry on the east side again. I don't know what you
East
call it.
End.
East End?
Yeah.
East End, but I don't know. Okay. Oh, and I did, did I go, what did I do? I guess I mixed up some stuff. Go to the next picture, and then you have to go back to this one. Here's the elephants on the bridge picture. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this, but in fact, I think I have it hanging over at the arcade right now, on the walls of the arcade. But you see Barnum is in the center of this. You can point him out. He's the guy with the white beard. And they finally fixed the bridge, and what did Barnum say? Let's go out and test the bridge. So they all, and so don't.
Let's create a photo op.
Let's actually, just go out and test the bridge. Let's all go out and test the bridge. And so they took the elephants, and the person that took this picture, and this is one of my favorite photographs because it was Lulu Farini, who was in the circus with Barnum, was in Barnum's circus, and he later became a photographer studio in Bridgeport, and he actually was known for dressing like a woman. Lulu Farini. Lulu, he's like a little skinny little woman, and he was, I can't remember what he did. Do you remember what he did? But anyway, he dressed like a woman. So that's the photo. But I tried to do close-ups of all the buildings that are behind there. You don't even realize they're there. And all the buildings we're talking about are still here, some of them. But Charles, go ahead and talk about those rooms.
What?
This would be Cassuth Street, and most of that's under the dog track. And what Mary's talking about are some of these buildings in the background that are on East Main Street. And that big square one I just pointed to had the roof blown off of it in the tornado, and they've just done a really beautiful job restoring it. You can see it right off the thruway.
Oh, they have.
Yeah, gorgeous.
They restored it rather than...
Yeah, David Barber was the architect.
Oh,
and
good.
did all
Oh,
the
that's
stuff.
right, he did come to see you. Yeah. This is the 1884 map of, it's a Sanborn map, which, if anybody knows what Sanborn maps are, they're actually, we have the reels at the library, and we have the big, huge map, atlases, and they were actually fire insurance maps. So if you, in any city, they have these fire insurance maps, and they would do these maps where they would show what the buildings were made of, were they concrete at the bottom, were they, and then they're a great source for the architecture of the city. And this was this is the actual flat, or the source map, which actually all this area, then you would go to the close-up of all this area, and that's what we use all the time for when we're trying to study a building. And that shows Knowlton Street along the way, and this is, and you can actually see where the Armstrong building is in this map. It's up on maybe number 20 there? Yeah, right there. Anything to say about that?
Well, this building was started in 1881, finished in 1882, and they filled in every bit of land because the Quantic River used to go right up to the street out here. And I don't know if it's still the case, but downstairs in the basement, when I first looked at it a couple of years ago, the original furnace was still in operation. It was the size of this room.
It's still here, not working.
Oh, that's
Still
good.
here, not working?
Yeah.
And the elevator too, how many elevators were here in Bridgeport before this one came in?
It was the 21st elevator.
21st?
Wow.
So I did this is 1884, it gives you the Barnum Street. Is that still called Barnum Street? They
No,
have
it's
that little
changed to
edge?
Barnum Avenue.
Barnum Avenue, but is that little bit called Barnum
Tech-
Street?
No, technically, the whole thing was named Barnum Avenue, and that little chunk of land is still technically owned by the city of Bridgeport as a public right-of-way. I did mention that Barnum and Noble gave away free land to factories that would build in the east side in the 1850s, and they gave away free land to churches, and the only church that took them up on it was the Methodist Church, Washington Park. And there's a beautiful brick church at the corner of Barnum and Noble today. But the original small wooden church, typical small New England meeting house sort of thing, was moved out of the way when they built that brick thing, and it currently stands right next door here, and it's covered with siding, but before the siding on it went on it, you could really tell it was an old New England church.
No, this is the only picture I have of the car that was actually Mr. Armstrong built. Charles, do you know where those copies of this article are?
Yeah, I've never seen this.
Charlie, do you know where those copies of give them out to everybody. Can I have one of them? Charlie, can I have one of them? This is actually an article that I wrote about the car. I guess I wrote this back in 2003. So somebody must have been bugging me about this building back then. I think I probably was, because I actually contacted George Dragone to see if he knew anything about this car that was built here. And there's very little to find out about this building. We had trouble, I mean, we figured it all out eventually, so far, but this is the whole thing about doing this project, is there's so many undiscovered things about about Bridgeport period, but about the east side of Bridgeport, that we can still uncover and try to
And who
figure
knows
out.
what was made by the Armstrong Manufacturing Company? They made a lot of garters.
They made
for
it
ladies'
mostly
clothes.
pipe fitting.
They did a lot of, pipe cutters and things.
Right.
Every basement in Bridgeport that's
Yeah.
before 1920 somewhere has an old iron pipe cutter, and it says Armstrong, Bridgeport, Connecticut on it.
Charles Armstrong, this is what I wrote. Charles Armstrong had started his company with Henry House. And when I read this yesterday, I was like, I forgot that I wrote this. But Henry House was a big inventor in Bridgeport. I
Yeah,
mean,
he had a horseless carriage in
Right.
1866.
So there was a lot of cars come out of Bridgeport, actually, much more than a locomobile. We all think of the well, I don't know, we all think about the locomobile, but some of us think of the locomobile. And this is the other one. This was actually, it had this big seat on the back. You could actually fit 4 people on it. And it was a kind of a, it didn't really go, they had one carriage that actually sat here for a long time, and it ended up in England, I think, for some reason. I have no idea why. But 1866, House had invented a steam-driven car, which is, you think of cars as being more 19th century, 20th century, but
Oh, 1896.
Riker had his Riker Electric, the late 1890s. But this company here that's in this building, actually, I think they lasted until like the 1970s. Does anybody know? Making other things like pipe fitting things, and people that have worked here over the years. And actually, Armstrong himself bought another car. He ended up buying something called the Elmore from Clyde, Ohio, and drove the vehicle back in the late 1880s. He started driving it on the city streets.
Well, what's amazing, both these guys just were so innovative. Henry House lived at 528 Noble Avenue, just a couple blocks up there. And we have Armstrong Place right across the street, which is lined with workers' houses. And right at the top of the little hill is a big French chateau-styled house. And that was the Armstrong
Isn't
mansion.
somebody restored it? Isn't?
Yeah, Demas
Or
restored it. Demas
Demas
Couteau
here?
restored it. It was in really bad shape.
Demas isn't here.
And it was the first building in Connecticut to be built out of concrete block. It was a brand new invention by a guy named Simpson from Waterbury, and no one had ever heard of concrete block since the days of the Romans. And he would mix into this concrete formula iron filings and lampblack, so that as this was exposed to the weather, the iron would start to rust, and it would start to look exactly like natural granite. And before the house got painted recently, you could still see that.
Well, back to the wagon.
Yep.
There's one of the wheels right here.
What are the wheels?
Ah.
Where is it?
There's one of the wheels.
Really? Well, no, I asked George Dragone about it, and he didn't really know too much about it. He knew that there was one in existence. He knew there was one sitting in a barn here on the east side for a long time. It was kind of rusted, didn't really go anyplace, and he knew there was one in England. I think, so there might be 2.
It was from here.
Oh, it was from
It
here?
was from here, and I think in 1997, they found it. It was in one of the lofts area. It was up, loaded away. A fellow named Abe Goldblum, who used to own the building, just kind of threw it up there to get it out of the way, he forgot about it, and then somebody found it and shipped it up to England.
No, so why?
I have no idea.
Somebody with money.
I know, it's funny, it's like a locomobile. It's funny because I have a very good friend from Australia who the reason why I have the friend from Australia is he came to do research on the locomobile, and he spent like lots of time here. And I even went to visit him in Australia, but he had a steam locomobile, and he got, they were some of the first cars shipped all over the world, and so you just can see locomobiles all over the place. Like why somebody would want the Armstrong car is another story. But these are the pipe tools that came from Bridgeport. Oh, it's just an advertisement, and that's it actually. But we can talk about other stuff.
We didn't talk about the Remington Arms Company. That was a big East Side institution.
Well, I'm just trying to do things from right around here.
Oh, okay. I'm just thinking what we didn't mention.
Can you talk a little bit about, particularly in the late 19th century, I was just finishing reading a book called Our Lives in Numbers, and it's about a kind of a social history of manufacturing in Massachusetts and the statistical collection of data. And it paints a pretty grim picture of the urban poor in the late 19th century with the tenements and all that kind of stuff. But I get a sense with Bridgeport that stark division of income wasn't quite as great as it might have been in the industrial towns of Massachusetts. It seems like the working poor here were slightly more prosperous than, say, their counterparts up in Lynn or North, or Springfield or something like that.
I wouldn't even know, because as far as I know, there were so many jobs that were plentiful. In the first part of the 20th century, the population of Bridgeport pretty much doubled, and so many people were coming here, and so many industries, and so many things. But we have pictures of like the Wheeler Wilson, or not the Wheeler, the Warner Brothers Corset Company, which was one of the largest industries that hired women.
Yeah.
But they actually hired like women that were, a lot of these industries had children. It was before the child labor laws.
Right.
So I think that there was a lot of people that were living very, not in the streets, but they had,
It's somewhere in my college library, this is going back a number of years, there was a book about 19th century industrial communities, and they compared and contrasted Massachusetts industrial towns with Connecticut industrial towns, and it was like night and day in terms of workers. And the Connecticut town they zeroed in on was Naugatuck, and they're comparing Naugatuck with like Holyoke, Mass, and Lawrence, Mass, and how that was so much more of a regimented thing that was designed to create profits for investors in Boston. And Connecticut was like a free-for-all of inventors coming up with new products and hiring workers, paying them really good wages, better than any place else in the world. I remember during World War I reading about the Remington Arms Company. If you were a worker in like Utica or Buffalo, you could expect to get paid about $15 a week. And in Bridgeport, Remington Arms was paying $150 a week, which is why everybody moved to Bridgeport and the population doubled inside of 18 months. And everything you read in the industrial history of Bridgeport is how proud we are that our workers are so prosperous, they're so well-read, cultured, and this is the best place in the world for industrial workers.
Is there any? Are there any books on one of my particular interests? Because my heritage is the Irish influx into Bridgeport in the late 19th century. I mean, you look at the census rolls, and they go from very few to like that's all you see is Irish names.
Yeah, the one thing that I know of is the Sterling Hill Historic District Report. This is the area on Millen Street, Pequannock Street, right adjacent to St. Augustine's Cathedral.
called what Goose
Huh?
Town?
No, this is Sterling Hill.
Sterling Hill.
It was laid out by this guy named Sterling, whose family pretty much controlled the whole town. His son was a mayor. His grandson wrote all kinds of great books about Bridgeport history. But he laid this apple orchard out into building lots. It was all built by old New England families in the 1820s and 30s. And it's like the 1830 census. There's one Irish surname. In the 1840 census, it's like 88% Irish. So it's like the first instance of white flight almost.
Yeah. Right.
And, you know, this becomes the core of the Irish settlement in Bridgeport, and it spreads out through the hollow from there.
Has anyone written anything about that whole?
You're going to write something.
There's,
Ready for it.
what I found the best source was a history of the Catholic Church that was done in, I guess, the early 20th
Yeah,
century.
we have many stories. Come in, you come out anyway to come see us. We have a lot of things written about the Irish, but we don't have just a book on the Irish in Bridgeport.
Yeah, the one thing that amazed me when I was doing historic districts, I do the mansions on the UB campus, and when one of those great industrialists or businessmen would die, there'd be a big obituary on the front page of the paper. You'd know where they were born, their whole life story.
Yeah.
And the Irish people on Millen and Pequannock streets, it's like nothing.
Yeah.
Best you could get is the funeral will take place Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock.
Right.
But, you know, no information about who they were, where they came from. And the census, it's like, you really don't know how much you can trust